Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Edward T. Harvard Gymnasium Dedication Ceremony. Before we begin, we'd like to give a huge shout out to the VHS Marching Band, our Select Choir, and our cheerleaders. My name is Sylvester Schifalalio, and along with Miss Ashley Sale, we are the Assistant Athletic Directors for Vineland Athletics. We'll get right into the ceremony. To start us off, we have Vineland Public Schools Superintendent, Mr. Alfonso Llano.
Good evening. What an incredible support that we see here this evening. This is amazing. We're so excited to have all you here tonight as we gather to dedicate the Vineland High School South Gymnasium in honor of a remarkable former teacher, administrator, coach, and community leader, Mr. Edward Harvard. This dedication is a testament to his enduring impact on VHS and our entire school community. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to the Vineland Board of Education for their unwavering support in making this tribute possible this evening. A special thanks are also due to Mr. Scott Mustarell, Mr. Chris Wilson, and the committee for their tireless efforts in organizing this ceremony, ensuring that it reflects the true spirit and significance of Mr. Harvard's contributions to Vineland High School. Let's hear it for the committee. I also would like to take a moment to welcome a few of our special guests who are here this evening, and the list is quite long, so bear with me. From our central office team in our athletic department, Mr. Nathan Fry, Dr. Sneeden, Mr. Mustarell over here, Terry Godlutsky, Dr. Rossi, Mr. Jeff Haynes, who's been supporting our athletic department, Ashley Sale, and our former AD, Robin Daplin. Our board members who are here in support this evening, Ms. Spinelli, President, Mr. Cedric Holmes, Ms. McKeema Douglas, Mr. Sabrana, Mr. Rivera, Mr. Silva, and also to our incoming board members, Mr. Bono and Mr. Medio. Let's hear for our board members. We also have quite a few of our elected officials here. Senator Testa is with us this evening. Thank you, sir. Assemblyman, and our distinguished guest, Nick Aselta, is here. Thank you for joining us. And Cumberland County Commissioner Victoria Lodes, she's here as well with us. I think in the back over there waving. Thank you for joining us. From our City Council, Dr. Arthur, President. Mr. David Acosta, Vice President. Mr. Spinelli and Mr. Albert Vargas are here this evening with us as well. Thank you for joining us. From our administration team from the high school, Jackie Alvarez is here this evening. Mr. Adams, Mr. Pierce, Ms. Kim Rivera, and Mr. Hall. I believe I got everyone, right? Good. Let's hear it for our administration. So at this time, I would like to turn the dedication ceremony back over to Mr. Schifalalio, who has been serving and supporting our athletic department with his trusted partner, Mrs. Sale. So, Mr. Schifalalio, it's all yours. Thank
you. Okay, at this time, we would like to invite up Pastor Albert Morgan for our invocation.
Before I pray, I want you to know that I had a blessed privilege of Mr. Harvard. I had to listen to him Monday through Friday, but he had to listen to me on Sunday. And so let's bow in prayer. Father, in the precious name of Jesus, we do thank you again for this time of celebration. We thank you for the life and legacy of Mr. Harvard. We thank you for his dedication not only to the school community, but the church community, and especially for the students. Thank you for allowing him to teach them teamwork and working together and how to endure in accomplishing every area of their life. Thank you for the many that have come back because he's taught them not only in the court, but also in the street and in the church. Thank you for his family, and we are appreciative that someone took time to honor him tonight. And we claim this now by faith. In your son's name we pray, and the people of God said amen.
Thank you, Pastor. At this time, we welcome the Vineland High School Air Force JROTC for our flag salute. Okay, thank you very much to the ROTC and the Vineland Select Choir. Our first presentation, we welcome Senator Michael Testa. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be here for such a momentous occasion, and we're dedicating this gym to a great man whose influence goes far beyond a basketball court, goes far beyond the walls of Vineland High School, goes far beyond the confines of the city of Vineland. You know, I'm so privileged to have been a graduate of this great institution of Vineland High School, 1994. And I had the privilege of being a student at Vineland High School while Mr. Harvard was the vice principal. He was ever present in the hallways of this institution. You're going to hear so many great things about a man that meant so much to all of us. Everybody knows about his prowess on the basketball court. And if you knew Mr. Harvard well, you heard the stories of him breaking so many barriers, being a star point guard for West Virginia University at a time when our country was still divided. And look, today we are still divided, unfortunately, but he really played at a time when our nation was divided, and he told us the tales of when he had to play some of those other Southern institutions and the slurs that were hurled his way. What many of you don't know was that he was far more influential than being just a vice principal, than being a phenomenal basketball player. He was a friend, not only to me, but to so many others. And for those that don't know, I had the privilege of being the #1 tennis player here for a few years. Mr. Harvard was one hell of a tennis player. He really loved tennis. Many people don't know that about him. And I get to present Mr. Harvard, his family, a joint legislative resolution, which I'm not going to read because so many other people are going to speak. But it is such an honor to be here, getting the privilege of not only being a graduate of this great institution, but being your state senator. But more importantly, not only was I a student of Mr. Harvard's, I was his friend. He is going to leave an everlasting legacy here at Vineland High School, and to all of the influential people that were integral in making this happen, I say thank you. The highest compliment that you'll ever hear come from my mouth about anything or any person is that they may have peers, but there are none better. I'm not so sure Mr. Harvard had peers. And that's no offense to you, Mr. Morgan. You were great in the halls here, too. But for those of us that knew Mr. Harvard, we can all agree that he may have had peers, but there were none better. I don't know who I'm presenting this proclamation to right now because there's nobody up here, so I'm just going to leave it here. Is there anybody from the Harvard family that's going to be accepting this on his behalf? I'm sorry that I didn't get, and you already know this about the man that we're all here for. You are his son. And for those of us that had the privilege of knowing him, he treated us all, I'm positive, the same way that he treated you. Just a wonderful human being who I had the privilege of knowing, had the privilege of getting his counsel when I was a senior. You know, there's some tough times when you're a senior in high school. And I got to tell you, Mr. Harvard was always there, not just for me, but for each and every one of us. But I got to really know him on the tennis court. A great man who is more than deserving of this honor. Thank you for being here for him. If you could just stay up here 1 second. So this is a joint legislative resolution. This is pretty much the highest honor I can give you and your family on behalf of your father, such a fine man, from myself, Assemblyman Antoine McClellan, and Assemblyman Eric Simonson. Thank you for being here to receive this honor. Thank you.
Joe Paul Spinelli.
Hello, unlike the senator, I don't have to remove the mic to speak into it. It's low enough for me. Anybody who knew Ed, as the senator said, knew what a great man he was. I knew him in a lot of different phases of his life. Basketball coaching, education, because I sat on the board of Ed, basketball refereeing, as a partner, and as a boss sometimes because I did the assigning. But more importantly, as a friend. Ed was the most loyal individual, no matter what happened. If you were his friend, he had your back. And that was until the day he decided to leave basketball officiating because he was ill. And unfortunately, prior to him getting a 50-year award, which he would have gotten if he did not pass, he did not get that. So Joe Rossi is here from Board 196 to present him with the highest award that we can give him through the International Association of Basketball Officials, which I'm past president, and Board 196. Joe?
Thank you, Paul. Board 196 has long served Vineland and this community as basketball officials. Those of us who came up under Ed Harvard, Paul Spinelli, there's also another great member here, Joe Baruffi. Joe's here. We all learned under these guys. And with Eddie, you know, it's famous, the referees go on the court and they're going to get a little feedback. Eddie didn't get feedback because everybody knew it wasn't going to last long. And Eddie was still going to be there when the other person left. So we learned a lot from Mr. Harvard. We have such gratitude for everything he gave us. Had a chance to officiate with him many times. Not as much, of course, as Joe Baruffi and Paul Spinelli, but we learned how the avocation should be done. He knew the game very well as a player, and that transcended into basketball officiating very easily. He made it look easy. So it's really a loss for us when he passed, and we wanted to honor him with this lifetime award from Board 196 as a lifetime member. I'd call up his son. It's a small token of our appreciation for everything Mr. Harvard did for us. We cherish his memory.
Thank you, Mr. Spinelli and Dr. Rossi. We now invite to the podium members of the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mr. Dion Thrabak, and I am the pole mark of the Brother Camden Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated. It is an honor to be here on this wonderful occasion that we are able to see the gymnasium dedication to our dear brother, Edward Harvard. He not only was a good brother, but he was one who we could lean on for mentorship, one who we sought after for guidance, and he was just down to earth, whereas he would help you as much as he could. We love our dear brother, and that is why we have not only me being the pole mark of the Brother Camden Alumni Chapter here, but we also have our province, Northeast Province representative, past pole mark, Richard H. Horton III, here. And at this time, we're going to have our past pole mark, who needs no introduction. He is a Vineland graduate, and his past pole mark brother, Eric Holmes, to present the proclamation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a graduate here from Vineland High School, so I think it's fitting that I do the recognition. I've known Ed Harvard for over 40 years. Ed Harvard and I grew up together in Vineland, met at Children's Courtyard. I was there first, Ed came second. And that's where the friendship began. And it's, you know, I watched him growing up, and I watched his dad as a kid putting on Kappa Alpha Psi. He was the first Kappa that I actually seen in person. It is one of the reasons why I'm a Kappa here today in this place. So I thank him for that. The proclamation reads, Brother Edward Theodore Harvard, Gymnasium dedication. Whereas Brother Edward Theodore Harvard entered the Heavenly Grand Chapter, the chapter invisible, on Wednesday, February 8th, 2023. He was born on January 5th, 1945, the son of Theodore Harvard and Dora Thompson Harvard. Whereas Brother Harvard attended public schools in Wharton, West Virginia, graduating from Ware High School, where he led the Red Riders to the state basketball champion. Upon completing his high school studies, Brother Harvard matriculated at West Virginia University, where he earned a full athletic basketball scholarship. Brother Harvard earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in physical education. Brother Harvard furthered his academic pursuits, earning a Master's of Educational Leadership at Glassboro State College. Whereas Brother Harvard, affectionately known as Ed, was initiated in the spring of 1986 in the illustrious Burlington Camden alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, greatest man in fraternity known to man. Brother Harvard was a life member of the fraternity and a lifetime member of the Burlington Camden alumni chapter, serving in leadership roles. Whereas Brother Harvard was a family man, being married to his sweetheart, Jacqueline, for 25 years, sharing their lives in a wonderful marriage, raising his son, Edward. He also loved spending time with his grandchildren, Christian and Emery. Whereas Brother Harvard had the illustrious career as a school educator for 38 years, serving as a teacher, a coach, an assistant high school principal, retiring in 2006. Whereas Brother Harvard had distinguished career as a high school basketball and track and field coach, molding the lives of young athletes, winning numerous championships, and enshrined into the Vineland High School Wall of Warriors, the Vineland African American Community Development Corporation, and many more. Whereas Brother Harvard served in many roles, including served as a high-profile high school basketball official, including service as the candidate supervisor in the IAAABO board of 196 basketball official associations. Whereas his brothers of the Burlington Camden alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated wish to acknowledge the Vineland High School gym dedication to Brother Edward Theodore Harvard. The Vineland High School Gymnasium will forever be known as the Mr. Edward Theodore Harvard Gymnasium. The proclamation will be presented to his family with a copy eternally retained in the archives of the Burlington Camden Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated. Humbly submitted with approval of the board and executed by the poll mark of the Burlington Camden Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Incorporated, on this 15th day of December in the year of our Lord, 2023. Recorded by Kevin Johnson, Keeper of Records, duly executed by Dion Thurbach, poll mark of the Burlington Camden Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. We can take one picture down here. Yep, yep.
Thank you, Kappa Alpha Psi. Okay, next to the podium, Mrs. Vera Hextall, Mr. Nick Aselta, and Mr. Chris Wilson.
Good evening. I am honored and feel very, very privileged to stand before you and to be a part of this momentous, historic dedication of Mr. Edward Theodore Harvard. Mr. Harvard, whom I have always referred to as Ed, because his family and my family was like one big Harvard Hextall family. Ed has left such a beautiful legacy of many, many attributes. There are a number of accolades I could give of Mr. Harvard this afternoon or this evening. Of course, he was extraordinary who loved his school. Briefly, I would give a few attributes of how I know Mr. Harvard. First of all, he had a great faith and was unabashed and unashamed to let anyone know that God was in his life first. Secondly, he was also unabashed and unashamed that Eddie was his son. He loved Eddie unconditionally until Emery and Christian came along, and Ed had to take the back seat. Sorry about that, Eddie, but you know how that goes. A few attributes of Mr. Harvard. Ed was very energetic, to seem never to tire, never unwilling to give his best and help others. Ed was a top athlete in his high school and college days and received numerous awards, which led him to eventually become one of the best Vineland coaches of all times. Ed was diligent and delightful in sharing positive attitude or positive advice to his students and his basketball team. Ed was also a role model for the school district, students, friends, and all that he would come in contact with knew Ed and his personality and his character. Ed was a dynamic coach with an attitude of empathy, gratefulness. He influenced many to become who they are today, which are successful students. His coaching was outstanding, tough yet loving, caring yet supportive, fun yet serious. In closing, I leave with you the following words, and if there are many students here, please listen to some of the attributes that I'm going to share about Ed Harvard, which you will be coming through this gym on a regular basis. So when you come in this gym, think of a few of his accolades. 1, he was trustworthy. 2, he was ambitious. He was reliable. Are you? He was vibrant. Will you be? He was encouraging. Do you? He was athletic. We all don't have to be that, but we can be the best of what we decide to do. And also, Mr. Harvard was very reachable. That was the friend, and that is the friend that I know, and he was a joy to be a part of our family. We love you, Ed.
Good evening, everyone. And first off, let me make note of, and it was mentioned earlier in a proclamation, Ed's wife, Jackie Harvard, what an inspiration she was to Ed, and Ed Jr. Obviously, I got to know him really well. I coached with Ed for 5 years. But most importantly, she was the driving force in that family, and Ed Jr. knows that. What a wonderful educator, what a wonderful leader this city had at Memorial School. I wanted to just give you a little bit of how important it is to have this name on this wall, what this gym is all about. Almost to the date today, 60 years ago, think about that, 60 years ago, I was a young kid, 12 years old, sitting in the bleachers, and Vineland High played their first game here against our hugest rival, Camden High School. Everybody knows how good Camden is in basketball. They still are good, always #1 in the country. Well, Camden came in here and Vineland High School upset, and there's a member of that team way over there, Robin Daplin, and I'm glad to see you here, Rob. But I think what this crowd needs to understand is a name on this wall means so much. The mystique of this school district and this gym was the newest and most contemporary gym in the whole state of New Jersey in 1964 when it opened. And we as a community were so proud of it. And we as players along the line, and there's many out there, and I know some of them will eventually, I'm going to point out, but many of them pulled right into that. They understood how important it was to play for Vineland High School, to play on this court. And that set the stage, that first game in 1964, to make this school successful in this particular sport. And I know Ed was tennis and officiating, did so many things in his life. But this dedication tonight is about this court and his coaching prowess in basketball. He is by far, and I go back into the early 60s watching basketball here. My brother played. Obviously, players are here from that era. He was the most outstanding coach ever to coach here in basketball. Done deal, obviously. We got one clap. We should have everybody clapping on that. I witnessed it. I sat with him. I sat on that bench with him, and you know who we wanted to beat every year so bad was Sacred Heart High School. So got some players laughing on that. So we geared up. We geared up for games. Atlantic City came in this court. And Eddie's team, there's some players over there. We upset them. 47-game winning streak. They came into this gym. They got beat. They went home just like Camden went home that time because Ed Harvard knew how to game plan. And I want to talk just a little bit about game planning because what game planning really means. Paul Barifri knows that. He was one of our first coaches on the freshman team with Eddie Harvard. Game planning was, hey, coach, how are we going to handle Camden High back in the heyday? Was our greatest team we had here in Vineland. We won over 20 games. We were 4th in South Jersey. We played Camden for the Group 4 South Jersey Championship, neutral court. And all Ed could talk about for a week, how are we going to game plan? How are we going to game plan? We did that game plan. We had an outstanding game plan. We lost by 3 points to the #1 team in the nation, USA Today, 35-0. 3 of those players went to Louisville, but we gave them everything they could ever ask for. But Ed's game plan was not just about the strategic part of that game. Ed's game plan was about how are we going to prepare these young men to be, these young boys, to be men in the future. And he succeeded by looking around this room and looking at all these players that are here, responsible citizens, productive citizens, educators, one guy on Wall Street, for God's sakes. That's amazing. And it was all because of Ed. Ed's drive, Ed's persistence. Ed said, the journey for these kids is all in the joy of this, Nick. We need to do this for these kids. We need to take them to Philly in the summer. He knows. We put him on our car. We went to the Baker League. We gave him every opportunity to get better every year. And this group that I was part of for 4 years got better, better, and better. And that's a tribute to what Ed had to do here. And he never gave up. So I want to end by just, once again, thanking the family. The family, Eddie Jr., I remember he was a little guy when I'd come over, and but his wife, Jackie, special place in my heart for Jackie, a powerful individual, powerful leader, and she and him were a hell of a partnership and a hell of a team, and God bless you, Ed, and really you were right. The joy was always in the journey. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to start off, I'm not going to say what I planned on saying, but I do want to thank all the people, all the family. We have people in here all the way from, Ed's aunt all the way traveled here from Buffalo, New York. That deserves a round of applause. And I know he has other family that traveled great distances to see this historic day. I want to thank you all. I especially want to thank Scott, who held and head our committee. He did a wonderful job steering the direction of this, along with our subcommittee, Cedric Holmes, Makima Douglas, Eugene Medio, Nick Aselta, and of course you just heard my Aunt Vera. Don Robbins, the athletic director, Sif, that stepped in, Kim Rivera, who has another special surprise for the family that we haven't seen yet. We have a couple more things for you guys that I didn't, shed the light to Eddie about, that I wanted it to be fresh and concise, even though his aunt tried to get it out of me the other night. I held strong. To the board that voted unanimously, I'll wait till a hand clap comes, unanimously, to have this gymnasium dedicated to Mr. Harvard. Next year, this time, Donnie will have his name on this court to share with Mr. Irv Gosman. And all I can say to the superintendent, Rossini, who is his secretary and an assistant, thank you so much. Rossini did a wonderful job on these programs, putting everything together. Dr. Sneeden, Mr. Fry, Dr. Rossi, thank you guys for your kindness and assistance with all these things as well. I'll share one story with Mr. Harvard. I never made the basketball team here. He always told me I was a good football player. And I took that as a compliment then. All right, yeah, Mr. Harvard thinks I'm a good football player. Come to find out, he never wanted me on that basketball team to even try out to play. But I did have a pleasure of him coaching me when we were youth at the CYO League at St. Isidore's. And to this day, verbatim, I can remember one of the lessons. And on defense, any of the old school guys here probably know, when you're playing defense, one of the things that is taught, advance, retreat. Advance, retreat. And to this day, that lesson has stuck in my mind, and I couldn't have been no more than 7 years old. He had a presence about himself. He had a way about himself. He had a way of leading that allowed you to aspire to want to achieve and be just like Mr. Harvard. So my senior year at Vineland High, I was getting letters from UMass that my mom we traveled up to the campus. I was getting letters from Syracuse. Mr. Harvard comes, pulls me out my English class. I had been good that whole week, so I know, I'm like, what did I do? Pulls me out of my English class, sits me down in his office, pulls up the computer system and shows me all my grades. He said, Chris, where are you going to college? I said, Mr. I'm going to UMass. Wilson, you're not going anywhere with these grades that look like this. Everybody knows his raspy voice. But what he did, he constructively criticized me. He then pulled out a book of all colleges from the East Coast to the West Coast that I could apply to and that I could play football at. So I went through this book. I saw a school in New York, thinking I'm going to be in one of the boroughs, but it was upstate New York. Mr. Harvard hand-guided me on getting to that college, where I subsequently went to Hampton University to play football after that, where I played up there. So I'll end with this. The people that had the courage, the administration that had the belief to hire this man when he applied to Vineland, when already working in Bridgeton, and it's so fitting that we're playing Bridgeton tonight. That school board in Vineland in 79 or 78, whatever year it was, took a chance to hire a man that we are now and will be forever etched in the history of Vineland right here in this gym. And I thank them for taking that risk and believing in him, and him being and meaning so much to everybody that showed up here today. Without that belief, when he sat there, probably nervous, rattling paper, trying to get this job, they gave it to him. He proved himself, and it's forever stapled in Vineland history. That deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much. I would like Aunt Vera and Mr. Acelta and Eugene Medio to come up real fast, please. Eddie, could you please come up?
On behalf of the committee, we have this commemorative plaque that we would like to give to the Harvard family. Edward Theodore Harvard, a great teacher, coach, and administrator for Vineland High School and the Vineland community. His passion to educate, develop, and mentor youth to do good to great things in everything will never be forgotten. Thank you to the Harvard family. Thank you, guys. We now have a special request from Mr. Aselta. We have a former player here of Coach Harvard, Mr. Dean Scarpa, that Mr. Aselta would like to hear from.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me. I think I can just lean over. That's gonna work. Because I want to be able to read. As I'm older, I need to use these to see. Harvard family, congratulations on the dedication. And thank you for letting me be here and take part in this. I'm gonna be very brief, but I'd be mad at myself if I didn't read this. I think if you were to ask anyone who's been involved with sports at some point in their life, they'd all have one coach that stands out from the rest in terms of the impact that coach had. And for me, that's hands down Mr. Harvard. Mr. Harvard devoted so much of his free time to improving his players' skills, not only for their own individual development and satisfaction, but for the betterment of the team. He would do things like drive us to Philly to play in the Sunny Hill League, which some weeks were multiple days with games and practices. In the summer, he would rent a van and drive us to a week-long sleepover camp in Pennsylvania, where he would serve as a camp counselor. He would also set up scrimmages for us against some extremely high-caliber teams like Chester High School in Philly and Camden High, so we knew what it felt like to get on the court with some of the best teams on the East Coast. He did all this to ensure we would never be afraid of any situation, any hostile venue we played in, or any superstar player we were to face. It was all part of his master plan. He knew all this hard work and exposure would make us better and bring us together as a team in every sense of the word. Excuse me. As anyone who knew Mr. Harvard knows, he was a special person who made those of us in his inner circle feel welcome and protected. No one could yell at us or scold us without his permission, but that sure as heck didn't mean he couldn't do it. He was a confident man and always did the right thing. He constantly stressed to us the importance of doing well in school and made sure we all kept our grades up and didn't miss class. There's so many stories to potentially share, but I'll mention one quick Mr. Harvard moment. There was one instance when we were up practicing our Sunny Hill League team, and it was towards the end of practice, which meant some scrimmage time, of course, that we all used to love. Now, I don't really know how or why, but Mr. Harvard got himself in the scrimmage. And again, I don't know how or why, but there he was running up and down the court. Now, for those of us who knew Mr. Harvard well, you recall how super competitive he was. So, not only was he out there playing, he was busting dudes up, popping J's in dudes' faces, sticking guys like glue on D, and dribbling around cats like they were standing still. But the funniest part about it all was after each good play, he would glance over to us on the sideline with a stone-faced glare as if to say, yeah, I know you all see me, and damn it, I still got some, don't I? That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Scarpa. If there are any other former players, family members, friends who would like to make comments such as Mr. Scarpa, you will have an opportunity to after the ceremony in the cafeteria along with some refreshments. We now call back up to the stage the son of Mr. Harvard, Edward J. Harvard.
Wow. This has been quite overwhelming. I'm almost speechless how beautiful this ceremony has been for my father, my best friend. I know he's smiling from heaven right now. Seeing all former students, teammates, is a beautiful thing. I want to specifically thank the Vineland Board of Education for their unanimous decision in renaming the gym after my father. I also want to thank those on the committee that helped put this together, Ms. Vera Hextall, Ms. Rossini Salerno, Coach Nick Aselta, my main man, Mr. Chris Wilson, who helped spearhead all this. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Don Robbins, Athletic Director, Ms. Makima Edward Douglas, Mr. Cedric Holmes, Mr. Eugene Medio, and Superintendent Mr. Alfonso Llano Jr. I'm so humbled and thankful to be able to accept this honor on behalf of my father. Just to tell you a little bit about our relationship, you know, my father to me was always larger than life. He was the coolest dad ever. He was a hooper, and sometimes I would get beside myself and test him, you know, Dad, you don't have it anymore. What? I'll show you what a Division I guard looks like. And he beat my tail up and down this very court right here, nonstop. He still had it, just like Dean Scarpa said at an older age. He still had game. He was also an educator, a leader in the community, and he had the coolest walk. I don't know if you guys remember the walk. So whenever I was with him, you know, going around the city, wherever we were, someone would always know my dad. It was like he was a celebrity out here, and everyone always showed him love, no matter where we were in the city. My dad, he really loved the community of Vineland. He loved everything about it. He loved the people. He always loved to be involved, especially when it come to education and basketball. You could find my dad at any park around the city, correcting a young kid shooting form. You know, as an educator, he always kept all of us straight, especially Mr. Wilson. He also protected us and gave us guidance and life lessons. To all of my former teammates, friends, classmates, I can say without a doubt and say genuinely, he cared about and loved all of us. And he wanted the best for all of us. I found out my dad got sick a couple years ago. And right before he passed, I would drive him around the city of Vineland. We would ride by all the parks and reminisce. We stopped by Tony's Lunch one day to get some breakfast. And as we were sitting there eating, we heard a voice. He said, "Hey, Coach." And we looked up, and it was Chris Leslie. And Chris Leslie was one of his former players from those 80s teams that Dean was talking about. And Chris had a special place in my dad's heart. He actually was his favorite point guard, not me. So yeah, my dad was very happy to see Chris. And as I paid and we got ready to leave, you know, Chris looked at my dad and he said, "Hey, Coach, I love you." And he gave him a big hug. And to me, that was a very special, monumental moment, knowing that my dad was sick, knowing that it's probably the last time he would see him. And it brought things full circle because it started in the 80s with my dad and as a coach, and he would always talk about you guys to me. He always talked about how proud he was of his teams in the 80s and how good you guys were. After we left Tony's Lunch, we rode to 3rd Street Park where we ran into Mr. Wilson here. Chris was happy to see my dad, and my dad was happy to see him as well. And he said, hey, Mr. Harvard, you know, we want to get something in your name one day, and, you know, whether it's a gym or a park or something, or maybe a basketball league we could start up for you. And he said, well, Chris, you know, I can get all the referees. I'll get Paulie on the phone, and we'll get them to ref the games for free. And I'm looking at him, you know, he's got stage 4 cancer. And, you know, no matter what, he just always had that energy. He always fought. And he was always an Iron Man to me. Just to give you a little background information on my dad, he was just a kid who grew up in West Virginia in a single-parent household with 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And he used that basketball to get himself out of his circumstances and become something. Who would have ever thought that a kid from West Virginia with no father figure, no one to teach him how to dribble that ball, will one day have a gymnasium named after him? The lesson for me was that he used the cards he was dealt, made an impact on so many lives in a positive way. He never made any excuses due to his circumstances, and always thought that's what life should be about. So, Dad, if you can hear me, not only were you my best friend and father, you were a father figure and mentor to many. I love you, I miss you, and I'm truly honored to be your son and accept what the community has presented to us for your service, sir. Edward Theodore Harvard, your legacy will live on. Live life, be selfless, have integrity, and become legendary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed Jr. At this time, we're going to ask Ed Jr., along with any other family members who would like to come up to the front of the stage here. Any other Harvard family members? Okay, we have a few surprises for you. First, behind you here to your left is a portrait of Mr. Ed Harvard that will be displayed in that shadow box at the entrance to the gym. That shadow box was built by Mr. Frank Medio and the VHS construction class. Next, if you follow Mr. Wilson to the baseline wall, as we raise the wrestling mat, you will see the formal dedication of the Edward T. Harvard Gymnasium. We'd like to thank our art teachers, Miss Anita Parent and Miss Sarah Friedley, for painting the dedication. Yeah. We'd like to thank VHS Maintenance and also maintenance of the board office for their setup. We obviously have had a basketball game before the event, and then we'll have a basketball game after event. Those guys work 24/7 to make all these things happen. As I mentioned before, everyone, family members are invited to the cafeteria for some refreshments, and if anybody else would like to make a comment, we will have a microphone available. And special thanks to the VHS boys and Bridgeton boys basketball players. You guys were special guests during this event. We appreciate your respectfulness. Good luck in your game, and thank you all for coming. Yep. Cafeteria is just outside of the gym.